Welcome to Apply IT. In this video, we are going to understand why to convert an async call into synchronous call. In our previous video, we learned how to convert an async call into synchronous call. If you are not aware, this is the sixth video on the series on JavaScript promises, in which we try to understand advanced JavaScript concepts practically. If you haven't watched those videos, do watch those videos, then come back to this video. You can find links for those videos in the video description. So let's jump into today's topic, that is converting an async call into synchronous call. So first we need to understand that what is the problem. We create async function to perform some non-blocking operation, that is asynchronous operation. So here the caller is not required to wait for the result. But on the other side, we say that we have any asynchronous function, and when we call it, we want to make it as a synchronous, then we use await keyword. So this is contradictory. Synchronous call is waiting, whereas asynchronous operation is non-blocking, or there is no waiting in asynchronous operation. So the question is why we convert non-blocking call into blocking call. So that's what we have to understand in today's video. So consider a situation where we have one API that returns some information. Now, based on response of this first API, we want to make call to another API. Let's understand that with one practical situation. We have one API called getParentEmail, which takes student ID as input and it returns parent's email as promise. Because it is async function, it returns promise. In the same way, we have another API function called sendEmail, which takes recipient email as input. The send email sends an email to this recipient email, and finally it returns status of the email sent. Because it is an async function, it is going to return promise. So let's try to apply this to one practical situation. So we have a list of students who has got less than 75% attendance, and we want to send an email to the student's parent. Now, to solve this practical situation, we do not have any direct function which takes student ID as input, then find out parent's email address, then send an email to parent, and finally return the status of that email. We are going to reuse this get parent email and send email, these two API functions, to create a function which is going to send an email to student's parent. So first understand the code of this get parent email API. So here you can see we have get parent email, which is actually simulating this API function which takes student ID as input, and it finds out the parent's email ID for that student in asynchronous manner, and it returns parent's email ID as response. So this function returns promise. Because it is an async function, it is returning a promise. So here we create promise object, and as input it takes executor function. Executor function get resolve and reject. We use this resolve in order to return the response after 3000 milliseconds. So here basically we are simulating this async operation using set time. Now, how to create this promise object, what are these resolve and reject, these concepts we learned in our previous videos. So in simple words, this get parent email is simulating an API call which takes 3000 milliseconds in order to return parent's email address. As an example, student's ID is 2024 CSE007. Then this API call is going to return parent email ID as parent-2024 CSE007 @gmail.com. So this is just a simulated call. In real world situation, it is going to make some real API call, and that API implementation is going to fetch parent's email from some database system. In the same way, we have send email API function which takes recipient email as input, and it returns status of the email sent as email sent to the recipient's email address. And again, this function also we are simulating, which takes 3000 milliseconds. So as an example, if recipient email is parent-2024 csc007 @gmail.com, the output will be email sent to, then the recipient email. So this is our send email API function, which is simulating asynchronous operation of sending an email to recipient's email address. So we want to use this send email function to send an email to the parent, but we do not have parent's email ID. We get parent's email ID from the first API function. So basically we want to perform this, that we pass student ID as an input to get parent email API function, which returns parent email as promise. We'll extract parent email from that promise. We supply that parent email as an input as a recipient email address to send email function. So basically what we want, that we cannot perform the second API call until the response of the first API call is received. So in this situation, if you want to convert this async call into synchronous, we have to use await keyword. In the same way, the send email API function is returning email status as a promise, but we want to get email status, not email status as promise. So for the second API call also, we are going to use await keyword. Next, we are going to write a function which is going to use these two API functions. Here we make call to first API function. We supply student ID as input. This is going to return parent's email address, and because we are performing it in a synchronous manner, it takes some time in executing it. So here you can see that we have called get parent email. We provide student ID as input, and we use here await keyword. So when we do this, the result will be parent email and not promise. So once we get this parent email, we pass that parent email as input to the second API call called send email, which is this one, which takes parent email as input. It sends an email to the provided recipient ID, and finally it returns status of that email sent operation. So here it is a synchronous because we have called here await keyword, and finally we return this status. This received status of this send email operation we can display on user interface. So let's see implementation of this send email to parent function. So this send email to parent function is going to implement this logic where it is calling one API, get response of the first API, passes that information while making call to the second API function. So once we get the student ID, we display it on console, and this operation will happen in a synchronous manner. It will execute immediately. Then we pass the student ID as an input to first API call called get parent email. Now because this is asynchronous function, we use await because we want to get result called parent email. So this is going to return this parent email. Whenever we use this await keyword in front of this, we are waiting for getting that parent email, and we print parent email on console. So while we'll see this practically, we'll observe that once this statement gets printed, after 3 seconds this second console log will execute. So once we get this parent email ID, we pass it to the second API call called send email. Again, this is asynchronous function. We want to wait for result, so we use await keyword. The result will be email status, and again we print it on console log. So when we see this practically, we'll observe that the first console log will happen immediately. Then after 3 seconds, we'll get parent email as a response of this first API call. We print it using console log. So the second console log will happen after 3 seconds. In the same way, the third console log will happen after 3 seconds of the second console log. So let's understand this practically on Google Chrome. So let's go to Google Chrome and try to understand it. So we open Google Chrome and we open its developer tools and we select console tab. So here we are going to write our code and we're going to execute our code. So first we write our first API function called get parent email. So this is our get parent email. Then we write our second API function called send email. So this is our send email function. So we have defined these two API functions which are simulated call. Now we write send email to parent, which is going to reuse the existing API functions. So here we have defined this send email to parent, which is an async function, because within this function we are using this await keyword. So we have to make this function as async. Now we are going to call this function send email to parent, and we supply this student ID. Now we are going to make call to send email to parents. Observe the behavior of the console log. I'm going to hit enter key. It is going to execute this function. It will print the first console log immediately, and then after 3 seconds it will print parent email ID, and again after 3 seconds of that it's going to print status of email. We got parent email ID after 3 seconds of this console log, and again status of email, we got this response after 3 seconds of this second console log. So here we have understood that in which situation we need to call await function in order to make any async call into synchronous. In our next video we will understand that if an API function is returning some error, and if we make call to this asynchronous function using await keyword, then how to handle those error conditions. So we'll understand this in our next video. Do let me know how you have used this concept in solving your problem. So do write it in the comment section that how this video was useful to you. Thanks for watching and happy learning.